Ready to go? I'll give.
That's how you.
We're running? Okay, so I want to thank everybody and welcome you to the Wildwood Council Planning and Parks Committee for Tuesday, March 21st. We will start with a roll call, please.
Here. Sorry, Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Okay. Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Okay. Councilmember McCutcheon.
Here.
Councilmember Rambo.
Here.
Councilmember Flasher.
Here.
Councilmember Galani. Chair Bartoni
Here.
and Councilmember Ottenberg.
Here.
All right, and we have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. Take us to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes made by Councilmember McCutcheon, seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg? Any questions, comments, or anything on those? Seeing none, I'm going to have to remember to look at the screen for you, Joe. So because I could use some help with that usually here too. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you very much. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is the public input. I don't see anybody on the attendee part and nobody in the audience, so we can just go right past this. That takes us to our action items, which we have 3 planning matters and 7 park matters. We'll start with the planning matters. First item is the sound mitigation on State Routes 100 and 109. Mr. Bunich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the department has prepared for your consideration a memorandum that attempts to accomplish several goals. The first is to kind of give a background on our previous efforts. And although the first sentence says November of 2023, it was actually November of 2022. We had the ability to review Dr. Thunder's report and the 6 recommended steps that he had identified for the committee and ultimately City Council to consider. It was thereafter the committee then kind of dove deeper into those 6 items and discussed at length at the last meeting where this item was on the agenda, options for sound mitigation along these 2 major corridors. And those options and comments are identified on page 2 of the memorandum. Ultimately, as the department concluded its presentation, the committee asked for some additional information. And so tonight, the department has provided that additional information as best as it could without asking an engineering firm to prepare a cost of a, let's say, typical sound wall. The department used several resources, and as you can see, sound walls can range anywhere from about 2.5 million to over $4 million per mile. And that's a linear mile, obviously. And then also there was a comment made by Ms. McCutcheon relating to a speed reduction that had already been authorized on State Route 109, and the department was able to find the resolution that did reduce the speed on State Route 109 from Shepherd Road south to New College Avenue. So there has been some progress at certain times over the course of the city's history. What the department is recommending tonight, based upon our conversation at the last meeting, for the most part, 3 steps. The first, for the department to proceed forward with its efforts with the Missouri Department of Transportation on a potential speed reduction, at least on State Route 109, but again, possibly on State Route 100 and possibly on State Route 109. Also, along with that, to request the increased traffic enforcement by the St. Louis County Police Department, Wildwood Precinct, on both of those corridors. I know that they are already underway with some of those activities at this time. The second item, and this again came from the committee's conversation at the last meeting, is to engage the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at the public space requirements of the city and then allow sound mitigation to be a creditable charge depending on the circumstances associated with the project. And then finally, the department would like to do a little pilot study if possible, just to see if there is some options out there that are maybe more low cost than what we've identified. And that pilot study would be along an area of Route 100 between Forest Leaf Parkway on the eastern end and Taylor Road on the western end. If you look at the sound analysis, the information provided by Dr. Thunder, there's several homes between those two streets on that back to Route 100 that actually are in excess of the standards that have been established. So the thought is that is a known location where sound mitigation would be appropriate, and that may be the best location to start our little pilot study and see what we can come up with if there's an approach. It may just be a bunch of analysis that indicates that we don't have enough space for a berm and landscaping. We don't have enough funds for a sound wall. We don't have this, but maybe there is something out there that additional study, a more intense study of a small area might ultimately allow us to find a solution or solutions. So tonight, the department is presenting those three items for consideration. And if there are any questions, Ms. Ripito and I would be glad to try to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Joe. And you're looking for a motion from the committee to move forward with these three, I guess, next steps.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Does anybody want to make that motion, Deborah? Okay, let me get a second. Do I have a second on the motion before I go forward? You seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg, and then Deborah, go ahead.
Yeah, Joe, I got a couple questions,
Sure.
and I don't know if you know the answers, but because the speed was decreased through what is it? Where St. Albans is, Shepherd Road, down past, I guess it's right to Etherton Road. And it was even further reduced from Pine Grove Loop up just a little before you get to Lafayette. So they're 40 and 45. So is there any way to determine if a lower speed around the roundabouts would make more sense? Because it seems like from all the comments that the roundabouts have increased the noise level wherever there is a roundabout. I know Mr. Garantano said that was the case definitely in Ward 8. I know it's the case in Ward 5. So I don't know if you could do some research and see what the difference might make, or if that's even possible. I know in most locations, the school zone's 25.
Well, certainly for the benefit of the council members that were not at the Ward 5 meeting, there was a question regarding the sound in the roundabout construction that has occurred by Kingstown Estates, Hickory Manor, et cetera. And Mr. Brown, our Director of Public Works, did mention that there is some studies now that indicate that roundabouts, due to the torque of the tires and et cetera, does create additional sound or noise. And so it's a known quantity. So certainly if the maker and the second of the motion would want to amend it, we could look at the roundabout and see if there's, just take the one at Pine Grove or Parkway and Route 109 and just see if there's anything that maybe would work there as well. These would not be extensive studies, and I would intend them to be fairly inexpensive in terms of cost. But I think if we can just maybe delve a little deeper and see if there's anything out there that just we're missing or somebody else has tried that's been successful. At the end of the day, it may not be successful, but at least we can answer questions from property owners that are experiencing the noise along the corridors and say, we did look into it. We even did a little bit of an intense study of it, and we were successful or not.
Okay, Scott, would you be okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, and did you have a comment also?
Well, I was just going to,
Hold on, Scott. Hold on one second. Are you finished, Deborah?
oh, I'm sorry, let her finish.
Yeah, that's right.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Oh, the only other comment I had was residents, not just from Ward 5, but from anywhere near the roundabouts. They are strongly opposed to a acoustical fence.
so,
That's my
okay. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to ask sort of to tag on to what Councilmember McCutcheon mentioned regarding the reductions in the speed limits. With the speed limits being reduced, do we know if in fact the actual speeds driven have been reduced or have reduced? Or is that another item that maybe law enforcement should be taking a look at?
Mr. Ottenberg, I actually think there have been a number of studies in that particular corridor, many just generated by the fact that improvements were planned, and as part of the improvements, understanding to traffic volumes, speeds, and et cetera, service levels. Let me do a little research with Public Works and see what they can turn up. And then I'll just send that out to you all as an email, just as a follow-up, if there's information out there that can gauge from when the resolution was passed to now. Have they seen, that 85% percentile? Has that stayed the same? Has it been reduced? Hopefully not increased.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Okay, Teresa, go ahead, and Joe, I got you next.
A couple things, talking about the roundabout and the noise that produced from that. There's going to be more noise or a longer duration of noise to certain places just because you're going in a circle. So it's directional. It's going to come off at a tangent every point along that arc. So that's just going to maybe not increase the decibel level, but increase the annoyance because it's a longer duration that they're there. But my question is there any way that, and I don't want to push things off on the residents, everything off on the residents, but we're taking on a great load here for people that are annoyed by the noise on the roads that's next to their homes. And these roads are not even our roads. Is there something we can do with the fence or the regulations, some ordinance that we can come up with to allow the residents to do something more, to put a berm where maybe they couldn't before, or a fence where they couldn't before, to do it on their own if they are seeing that they have a problem, and they, to just allow them to do it instead of it being a burden on the city?
Ms. Clark, I would suggest that they can now. Let's assume in the case of like Kingstown Estates, which would be in this case by the Pine Grover Parkway Route 109 roundabout, that southwest corner of the development. It's either right of way or it's either common ground generally. The county, even for the most part, recognized that you shouldn't have the rear lot lines backing up to the edge of right of way, and generally put common ground, a small common ground strip to separate the public right of way from the private lot. So from the perspective of the department, if the homeowners association came in and said, we'd like to do this, and it's in their common ground, that would just be a City of Wildwood permit. If they needed more space and wanted to use state right of way, then that could be a combination of both. But I would probably say, if there's a solution out there that a HOA or an individual property owner would like to try, I think we could accommodate that right now. And I certainly don't want to spend money we don't have. And as you know, we've been doing some belt tightening for a couple of years. But in the particular instance, the one that the department selected for the pilot program, now we've added the additional roundabout, that's an area where those homes predated the new installation of Route 100. So in most instances, the road system was there long before the houses were built. And so in this case, it's the opposite. And you could argue that the roundabout and the expansion of Route 109 came after the homes in Kingstown, Hickory Manor subdivisions were built. So I think they're two good examples. They're not examples necessarily that we can replicate everywhere, but I still think there's some value to at least digging a little deeper.
Anything else? You good? Okay. Joe Farmer, you're next. You look like you're in a very comfortable place.
Yeah, we're gonna try this. I'm in a little bit of a wind tunnel, so I apologize if it's really loud, but I do think it's important on that spot over by Evergreen where the road was widened after the houses were put in. And I also agree that even where the roundabouts are, those were new compared to when the houses were built. I think we need to spend probably some time and money figuring out what can be done to help those folks. I'm somewhat less concerned with, whether it be new developments or newer built or yet to be built, where people are buying properties backing up to a major highway and then complaining about the noise. I just find that somewhat odd. I mean, you can see what is in front of your house or behind it or whatever. So I think especially maybe looking at like that one corner that looked very red, which is in the reserve direction, we probably want to make the developers know that that is something that they're going to need to think about when they're putting these plans together, because 10, 15 years down the road, we're going to get these questions again and we knew it was going to be a problem. So I'm all for doing some testing where Evergreen was. Those guys seem to have sort of gotten a surprise deal, and the same with the roundabouts. But I don't know that we need to do this all the way down the road. That just seems like overkill to me.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Farmer, from the department's perspective, I think they're good 2 test locations. And pardon my interruption, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Yeah, so I think I'm along with what Joe just said. I think we really do need to do some planning. I think the piece in here about having planning and zoning look at future developments and make sure that there's condition in there that help mitigate sound. And we've got 2 more roundabouts coming online really quickly here. One at BA and then one down at Wild Horse. The one down at Wild Horse, there's homes sitting right there. So I don't know if I know the city and the state kicks in the money for that. But while we're looking at the construction of those, maybe we need to take that into consideration and have some kind of plan to mitigate sound before or as they go in.
And just as a response, the committee's concerns have been voiced previously in this regard. I think that leads part to the public space requirements potentially being amended. Today, the Department of Public Works, the Department of Planning met with McBride Homes about the project over here on Crestview Drive. 8 or so of the lots back to Route 100, and we identified sound mitigation, and they were already thinking about it. And although we think of physical improvements to mitigate sound, whether it be an acoustical fence, a berm, landscaping, one of the items we discussed today is just changes in terms of the quality of the product, like for windows and doors and insulation. Maybe we don't have enough room, but as a building community, we can direct them that you're going to have a noise issue, build a better home relative to sound mitigation, and then everybody succeeds. So we've taken to heart what you've all said.
Scott, go ahead, and probably got you next.
I wonder, can we put that map of the sound levels back up on the screen for a moment, please? So I was curious about Kingstown Estates, which as you're heading north on 109 is on the right-hand side. And a major portion of that butts up to 109 is elevated, and there's, some concrete retaining walls there. And then there's a hedge on top of that. And then as you go along the sidewalk on the right-hand side, there's a number of privacy fences and so on along there. So I'm wondering, I guess I'm just kind of curious as to where the sound measurements were actually taken along there. Were they taken on the sidewalk? Were they taken from somebody's backyard? I wonder how much of that elevated level of sound is actually reaching the homes.
Is that those blue dots?
Or
Is that those blue dots on
Yeah.
the map? Yeah.
my understanding from Dr. Thunder is, I think there's a few red dots actually there should be a few red dots, or maybe they're yellow. Those were actually field tested. The others, the blue dots, I believe, were generated from the computer program.
Okay.
And they had a high level of confidence in the computer program. And as you know, during the presentation, he said, we had just received a pretty substantial update to that program, which improved its, I think its its function, its accuracy much better. So in these instances, the yellow dots were taken on public property. We did not have the authorization to go onto private property. And we took them from the corridor locations, as I recall. The others are generated, so they may be able to be a little more off right of way, so to speak, because they're just computer generated and the coordinates could be taken anywhere.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, could you please just bullet out the three items that were that you're asking for us to approve? Because I got lost in the document. I don't have it in front of me, and I recall, a whole bunch of line items. Yeah.
So the first item would be authorization from the committee to proceed forward and engage with MoDOT about reductions in speed limits, particularly now on Route 100, but potentially still on Route 109. A part of that particular recommendation is also then just engaging our police department to increase enforcement so as we can reduce speeds. And for the most part, what I would envision, do what the Clarkson Valley Police or the city of Clarkson Valley did on Clarkson Road. For the most part, there may not be a police officer there, but they patrol it heavily. So you tend to slow down there just because. So that would be kind of the approach. So that's the first step. MoDOT, our police, to address speed. The second step would be, I have to look now, the public space. Our public space requirements would not consider sound mitigation efforts a credible charge. And so the idea would be, if we want to really be serious about it and make it, let's say, accessible for a developer to consider, then it could be a public space charge. And if it's a berm with landscaping and we we have a trail in front or behind, that all seems to work. So having our planning and zoning commission start that analysis. And then finally, the third step would be doing those two little pilot analyses or studies along the rear lots of the Evergreen subdivision between Forest Leaf Parkway, Taylor Road, that back to Route 100, and now the roundabout at Pond Grover Loop Road and Route 109.
And those would be by Dr. Thunder. Do you have any idea what that would cost? Because that's the only item that has any cost associated with it other than the manpower. Is that?
I would probably engage Dr. Thunder for a cost estimate. I probably would look at McClure Engineering as well. Excuse me, a local company.
Do you have money to do it?
Ms. McCutcheon at the end of last year kept asking Mr. Cross, and Mr. Cross kept asking me, are we doing anything with sound mitigation? So Mr. Cross and I put some money in our consultant budget to specifically look at sound mitigation. So yes, there is money for a study or studies, small studies, let's say in this case.
Okay, so just a general comment, reduction in speed inconveniences a lot of people on a non-safety related issue. It's just a convenience for the neighbors at the expense of a whole lot of people. So I'm generally reluctant to do that, particularly because the document you presented to us says that a 50 mile per hour to 40 mile per hour reduction. So 20% reduction amounts to 4, maybe 5 dBs of difference, which is not meaningful. It's barely a sense. You're barely able to sense that difference. And so I would tread carefully on trying to get further speed reductions, because they've already established the safety margin in that area. So anyway, that's just an editorial comment. Thank you.
Maybe I'm not as optimistic as you, Councilmember Rambo, but I would hope that it would actually just bring the speed limits down to the previous.
Well, enforcement of the
Yeah.
existing regulation or limit, that's appropriate. But I have both hands on the wheel and I'm paying attention. I'm not smoking or eating a cheeseburger or whatever. And I feel like I have a safety margin, a triple the safety margin. You know, my brakes are good, my tires are good, all those kinds of things. And going slower and slower just because it's noisy in someone's backyard is asking a lot of, you know, of responsible driver.
Well, at least in from the department's perspective, from West Glen Farms Drive to, let's say, Pond Road, I think a reduction in speed there, regardless if it benefits sound mitigation, is justified. We've had a number of fatalities in that area. As soon as they put the road in, the signal at Taylor Road and Route 100, someone was killed because they were stopped at the light and somebody came from west to east and didn't see the light and ran right into them. So
That's before the flashing yellows
Yes.
went up.
yes,
Those
very
have
much
been
so.
quite
It was
helpful,
right
I
after.
think.
So I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of ways maybe to peel that onion and not inconvenience the driving public.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Joe Farmer, go ahead. Teresa, I got you next.
Yeah, I think that this is probably, I hope it's germane to motion, but Joe, it might also be worth just reaching out to Chesterfield. They have like a sound waiver or something that you have to sign when you buy a property in Chesterfield that's based on the Spirit of St. Louis Airport. We certainly don't need one of those for the whole city, but perhaps in some of these new places where developments are coming in, certainly if the developers aren't going to be willing to put in some kind of mitigation, it might be a good idea for the city to just have that as an extra backstop, because, you know, it's not, I'm not sure that it's great that it would be our fault or our responsibility to take care of something because the developer didn't want to put in the right kind of windows or whatever it might be, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. And I put it on my list. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Punish, do we have, or can we put together, I think that Dr. Thunder would appreciate this too, to have some kind of a scattered density plot with all of the complaints that we've had, and so that we can see exactly where the people are that are affected so much that they're going to complain about this. And so that we can see how many people are actually complaining and how many times they're complaining.
I'll do my best to have that prepared.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So seeing no other comments, we have a motion on the floor. Are we good with the motion or do we need it repeated? I mean, I don't, but you good? Everybody, okay. Everybody good? Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you. Takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is the MyGov permit software, excuse me. Ms. Ripito.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. As you know, the Department of Planning, as well as the Department of Public Works and Parks and Rec, process thousands of applications, code enforcement violations, maintain city assets, and that means managing a lot of paper. Both departments tend to keep track of things very differently, but it generally involves a lot of spreadsheets and emails. And over the years, there's been turnover in staff, so things get filed differently, you know, throughout the years and in different places. And so recently, the departments requested software to help with this, to help keep track of all of these in one cohesive place that, you know, we can look up an address and find everything that you know, goes with that. So the city council approved the purchase and implementation of MyGov software in January of this year, and we're very much appreciative. And implementation began at the beginning of February, and it looks like we will be going live by the end of March. So it's very exciting. We've been working very hard to get this up and going, and thought that we would give you a little sneak preview of the software. So I'm going to step back over to the other microphone so that I can show you with my computer. Okay. So from the residents' perspective, this is the city portal that you're looking at here, and it goes through the GIS requests, permits. This is kind of hidden, code enforcement, work orders, and then it has contacts and knowledge center, my requests, and then you can download the actual MyGov application, which can be taken out into the field by people both in-house and by our contractors. We deal with about 17 different contractors that we use regularly, and so they can also set up a collaborator and a collaborator account and then work directly with the city on work orders. So residents or collaborators will be able to go in and click on GIS, and right now it does have our parcel data in here. There we go. And you can click on any of these parcels and it gives you essentially the same information on it that St. Louis County has. It hasn't been completely set up, but we intend to add other information like wards, zoning, and stuff like that. But you can see that it gives you essentially everything that St. Louis County has on their website. In addition, people can file for applications online. They can set up a collaborator account and just sign right in. We can give them updates directly through here so that we don't have to make the phone calls, the emails. As soon as we hit a next step, it will go on to them. So it will save us a lot of work and keep people informed more quickly. Then we also will have an area here for code enforcement and for work orders in which residents can go straight in and report a violation, which will then feed straight into the code enforcement software. So it will start the case for them essentially, so they don't have to go through and type in all that information themselves, and they can go out and verify it and upgrade it to a case or not. And there's also work orders, and this would be more pertaining to our streets, potholes, issues with the parks and such. You can go in and report an issue. You can also, instead of scrolling through all of it, you can search the work orders. And when you get further into it, when you're going to report the issue, you don't even have to know the address because, oh, there it is. It will be hooked up to our GIS. And so essentially you could be out wherever you are and tap your screen of where you're at in the location, and it should just go straight through there. So then on the back end of it and how it's going to help us be more efficient, we have the permits, inspections, code enforcement, GIS, asset management, and work orders, and request manager. So all of these different modules work together. And so essentially, if we are going to put in a permit, we can see if there's code enforcement violations out currently. So that could stop us from issuing the permit unless it's related to, and we need them to fix something. And vice versa. Code enforcement can also go into the software and while they're out in the field and look to see if a deck is, somebody actually has a permit for the deck that's being installed right there. And so it should make things more efficient and help us keep track of everything. And it also ties in our assets so that we can keep track of those and know, more regularly when they are, going to need to be replaced and budget accordingly. And then our GIS works both on the back end and the front end. So we can save layers in here that involve, say, our city assets or, things that we need to see from the back end of things and not share with the public. And so on all these different things, we can do that as well. And so our goal is to make things more efficient, more effective, and all of these processes are assigned to individuals in the department. So it should show up on their dashboard so that they get dinged. And if we hit a point in which, this has been under review for longer than we'd like, it gives you another ding. And so with that wraps up the department's presentation. If you have any questions, Mr. Vunish and I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Pretty slick. Scott, go ahead.
Thank you for that presentation.
Absolutely.
How many people will actually have the ability to access this system and record information in the system or pull information out? Guess.
Everyone in everyone in both the planning and public works department, as well as parks and finance, city administrator. Yes.
Okay,
So,
perfect. And then what type of orientation and or training is taking place to assure that people move from doing their traditional activities in terms of storing information and moving to this centralized location for the permitting process. And I just asked that question because my observation has been in private industry. I've seen a lot of companies implement some type of software that's designed to centralize the storage of information, only to realize that a lot of people after the implementation of that software are reluctant to give up their old way of doing things.
That is 100% true. And I've experienced it myself. I've actually implemented MyGov at Manchester and before that Town and Country. So I do understand the struggle is real. However, this is designed to make things a lot easier. And honestly, when it comes down to permits and such, they're going to have to go into the system. There isn't the option of not going into the system. We are also training. We've had both departments in training much of last week and the week before to learn how to use the modules. And right now we're actually in a testing phase of it. And honestly, people are more excited about it than I thought they would be. But there isn't really an option to not put it in the system. And our administrative assistant will be doing a lot of the initial data entry for all of the applications and such. Code enforcement, a lot of our violation reports and stuff like that come in online anyway. And when you have something this accessible for people, then you tend to get more online than not, which, definitely gets rid of the data entry there. And code enforcement, our violation notices are going to be the same essentially. And they have to be issued through here. They can't be replicated. Same with our permits. And so everything is going to have to go make it through the system in order to actually print out the permit or close out the violation, send the violation and such. So there isn't a whole lot of option of not doing it this way.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. I guess then, are we then moving to a truly paperless type of system like it appears the county has moved to for their permitting and inspection process?
Currently, I would say no myself. There are a lot of, what we can approve paperless, like we would love to, unquestionably. But I think that's going to be left up to the individual departments and how they want to handle it moving forward. There are some applications that I still like to get paper copies of. So therefore, we might. And if people want to come in and drop off an application, I don't actually want to make things more difficult on them. But if we can do it paperless, then yeah, by all means, it's a move in that direction. We'll also be able to accept online payments with the system. So that's a step there.
It all sounds very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any problem? Rob, go ahead.
I'm excited that you're excited to implement this. I think it's going to be great. The intention is to link to this right from the homepage, like some of the facilities you mentioned, and then the general public will have read-only access, and then the rest of you all behind the scenes will do your data entry. Is that kind of how that's supposed to work?
That is correct. If you want to bear with me a second, I actually have a public portal. I created my own account on the public portal again, so I could test things out. Okay. So this is what a collaborators portal is going to look like. So this is on the back end.
Collaborator means a staff person?
No, this is actually, any resident, any
okay.
contractor, anybody, they have to become a collaborator in order to submit an application. And so this is what they see on their end. They can also go in, and the city of Wildwood is just one of many cities that utilize this software, so they can go through any of the cities and that way. But essentially, they'll have a dashboard that is very similar to the one that we see on our end, and so they keep track of their applications, correction items, stuff like that, and this will just go straight to them. And so they'll have a different view than we have, and from the outside, from the public portal, that's a completely different thing, beast in and of itself. And that's just for the general public, where you can report complaints or requests or go in through GIS. So
I was asking, I have a different question than the one you answered. That's my fault. I'm completely confident that the staff is going to figure all this out and it's going to be great. My question is more as an end user, as a private citizen. I presume that this will replace our current GIS, the beacon or whatever that is, where we can look up parcel numbers and we have limited information. And you guys are going to add to all that information so that if I called up a parcel, it would tell me potentially lots more information that's publicly accessible through other sources in sort of a one-stop approach. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yeah, that's a whole lot longer conversation than just this, but yes,
But that's the
essentially you
intention-
will
That's
have,
the intention, and we own the tools now. And it's
yes,
just a matter of doing endless data entry to get this stuff.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so you sort of mentioned that we're rolling a sort of a complaint, the existing complaint system that we have for potential code violations and so on and so forth. We're going to eventually roll that into this system as well. Is that also true?
So online complaints essentially come in through Civic Plus, just
Uh-huh.
the city's website,
Okay.
and they just come in as an email notifying us that there's been a complaint. So yes, that will be eliminated and replaced by this because this will go directly into the system and thus eliminate staff time typing in the complaint and such.
Just a central repository.
Mhm.
We don't have to go off on this, but the reason for that question is because we're getting increasing numbers of bitter complaints concerning right-of-way and easement problems associated with the internet deployment.
Mhm.
It's getting to be real awful. And by the time we get done with phase 2, it'll be a year and a half or 2 years down the road. And I'm wondering how we can, if we have to look up a bunch of right-of-ways anyway, we might as well get them in the database. That's one perspective. And the other perspective is maybe we can leverage this system to track those complaints somehow. And we have a lot of people that don't know whether they're getting internet. Is my address on the list for phase 1? Is my address and it's just a nightmare. And I'm hoping that we can, maybe go through real quickly and say these homes are within the boundary of the deployment map, so they're going to get internet and maybe make people self-sufficient or something like that. Is there a possibility that will happen, or should we have an offline conversation, or how do I move that forward? And maybe this is not the right forum, but is there a way I can make that happen?
That's a much bigger conversation that I would be happy to discuss with you.
Okay, sure. So just be aware that I'm going to
Sure.
try to ask you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the tangent.
Deborah, go ahead, and Teresa, I got you next.
Yeah, so can our residents access this and enter what they see as a code violation or questions or whatever?
Yes. Let me go back to the. Here we go. Okay, so from our website, there will be essentially a link that will take them into this portal if they want to report a code violation. And so this is what they will come to when they are wanting to report a code violation. So yes, this page right here will be accessible to all residents, everyone. And so yes, they can go in and report work orders here. So any right-of-way issues that happen to, happen, as well as code violations for property maintenance on personal properties. They can just go straight into here and report it, and it will go to the person that is supposed to go to, because we have it siphoning essentially to the right department, right people to handle said complaints or questions.
Don't have to be a collaborator and they don't need an access.
No. And if you wanted an update on, say, a code enforcement violation, it actually gives you like a little code so that you can go back in and put your code in, and it will give you an update on that.
Right, well, thanks.
Teresa, go ahead.
Two short questions. One, so this doesn't look like, if I was a resident and I wasn't involved with the city government, I might not understand where to put just a general comment or a complaint, because I don't know. Is it a code violation? I don't know. So how are they going to know that? And my second question is, when that's in there and then you're going to pull out the information, you've got this list of all of these internet complaints. And is it going to be categorized automatically into these are all internet questions, or these are all complaints about, instead of having to go through 350 to pull them out? Is it going to be branched out and have a plexus of?
Sure. So if you go under code violations, we have, essentially animal regulations. It is somewhat categorized as far as that's concerned, but it's also really easy to search for a violation. If you just type in trash, it will bring up anything that is regarding that. And so it's not fully set. Oh, there we go. And maybe it's rubbish. And so, yeah, it will pull up the search feature is really great on it. I agree that the list is a bit tedious. But yes, the search feature works very easily to find anything that you're looking for. And we have organized things in like these violations right here are the most common code enforcement violations that we get. And this list is longer than I would like it to be. So we're going to go through and eliminate some of those and then have a miscellaneous, just in case we're not covering it with whatever it is that we have in here already. So.
Thank you, but I guess my question still remains the first one.
Uh,
The residents, if it's just me and I'm not involved in any code violation, I might not realize that's where I go.
Sure. So this is the general link. We can actually link the individual pages. So like, see where it says violations, we can send a link that would take people straight to this page or straight to work orders. And the way that I've set it up at other places is having several different links in several different places, like where we would normally have our code enforcement complaints right now, as well as, work orders, stuff like that. If we have it in several different places, then people tend to find it because all of our brains work differently. And so it's just a link. So it's not taking up a whole lot of room on the webpage.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. I do have
Thank you.
like one question though. Is the information on here become public information? Where I'm going with it is if Deborah's neighbor files a complaint because she's having loud parties every weekend, does people know who reported that? Or is that still confidential information?
So essentially anything that comes through us is public information, period. So all the things that would remain public information would still be public information. We have like this will require you to put in an email address in order to like issue the complaint or the work order or whatnot. But I've gotten a lot of them that haven't exactly been the right name or the right email address in order to make the complaint.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, essentially everything that is public information is still public information. This won't change any of that.
Okay, great. Thank you and look forward to this. Oh, I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead. Sorry.
So tagging on to the chair's question, right now, if somebody lodges a complaint about a code violation, is that information accessible regarding who it was that lodged that complaint?
With a public records request, if we have the information, then provided we didn't receive it anonymously, then yes, I mean, essentially it's public information.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Rob, go ahead.
So can I assume that all the ordinance stuff is backed by that boilerplate sacrosanct latest code revision system that we have on our website currently? It's a different entity. I forget the name of it. What? Yeah, E-code. Yeah, is it? So that's if you look at our E-code, it will be exactly the same word for word as the code that you demonstrated.
The violations in here, some of them are from municipal code. You'll see the MC and then it's got the section.
Mm-hmm. So you guys have abbreviated then.
So we abbreviated municipal code, but then the language that's pertaining to it should be exactly from our code.
Yeah, I just see over time, if there's a manual if there's a manual intervention by a person trying to do the right thing and summarizing the code, then the code changes. I'm just hoping that there's a direct linkage so that this code always gets updated
We'll have to update it as our code gets
for
updated.
you. Okay.
But again, it's all the same department, so we should be able to keep track of that pretty easily. And
Okay.
this saves code enforcement from typing it in anyway, so it lessens the odds of mistakes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. It takes us. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep
You're
listening.
fine, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add one thing. As you know, when we introduced the new county system, county had a number of resources that they had published along with the change to basically orientate users how this all works. And that's something we've got to look into just to kind of let people know a collaborator is you, not necessarily something else. So I think it's in our best interest to provide a little training as part of this, and that needs to be on the website and we need to make it available. So that's something that we can promise you will do so that people at least have enough information to understand what the terms mean and what the expectation is once you get into one of the dashboards.
Anything else? All right. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is the recent development trends within the city. This is a FYI, but it's always a great summary. Does anybody have any questions for the department?
Do we have to vote on this?
No, they weren't. It was just an information. Yes, yeah. Thank you for that, though. Any questions for the department on the development trends? Teresa, go ahead.
One comment, I think that you just tried to make me out to be a liar when I said that it's always the top three. And this time, the top three changed, that those interior and decks and fences this time was high on the ladder. So I was just, I'm proven wrong.
Well, I'll let Mr. Newberry.
We have that recorded by Rob. It's on YouTube. It's everywhere. This will be in the minutes. Yeah. Any other questions or comments for the department? Okay, seeing none, we'll go and move on to park matters. The first item is the emergency repairs to Rock Hollow Valley Trail. Mr. Vunich.
Pardon me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, recently our former superintendent of Parks and Recreation was on the Rock Hollow Trail and noticed a blowout along a portion of it that adjoins a creek. It is near Bridge 5. And so with that acknowledgement and identification, Kristen, Stacy, and I visited the location and took some photographs. Obviously, the Rock Hollow Trail is in an area that has a lot of water associated with it. It's in a valley. The valley is incised. There's a lot of different drainage tributaries that feed into it. And then there's this main branch of the creek that eventually drains to the Merrimack River. Recognizing that we are in a position that the blowout is getting dangerously close to the edge of our asphalt trail, the department began an immediate assessment of what the next steps would be. We've had this happen on Rock Hollow Trail one other time. It's a very similar set of circumstances, but further to the south on the trail itself. And so the department contacted Kelp Contracting, who had did that repair under an emergency order, so to speak, and asked Mr. Kelp to go visit the location, do an assessment, and ultimately provide cost for the repair work. Mr. Kelp did all of those requested actions, and that email that's included as part of the memorandum is his assessment of the cost. In reviewing the information that was provided tonight, the department does recognize that there is only a single bidder, and in this case, it's Kelp Contracting. The reason that Kelp was chosen, again, was from past experience, and they also were the contractor that built the trail and the 13 bridges that now form this 2.5 mile corridor. However, there are other contractors that are on our list of maintenance companies that is approved each year. As you know, we basically bid all of the items. We have a list of contractors that they sign contracts, and then we can utilize them for a number of different projects and needs in the city. So that's the first thing. There is just a single bid. The second item is certainly a concern that would be legitimate in that although Mr. Kelp has provided a cost estimate, he's not provided any engineering associated with it to diagnose the problem. And then is the solution just what we did in the past, which is on the approved engineered plan for Rock Hollow Trail. So those concerns have been voiced, and certainly the department doesn't want to necessarily ignore those concerns. So tonight, certainly I just wanted to advise you, there's only a single bid. And certainly there is another company, I think, that we could contact and ask for a bid as well. And then there is the engineered plans from the original construction. And this has been there since the original construction. That would be the template I would expect any contractor to use. But certainly we could look at it from a perspective, do we need to do a little bit more to guarantee we're not back here again in another 4 to 5 years? So from that perspective, I was originally going to ask for authorization to proceed forward to city council with this, but I think based upon the conversations I've had up to this point, I would prefer that the committee direct the department to obtain an additional bid and to do some additional engineering analysis to see if there's a better solution than what we started with. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So does anybody want to make that motion, it being in Ward 6? Okay, you'll make that motion, and Dan, you're seconding it? Okay, and go ahead with your comment, Rob.
Yeah, we have the engineering may or may not have been sufficient to the task, given the couple of major downpours we've had since this thing was put in. So the concern, I think, is legitimate that the engineering may be insufficient going forward, and we'd rather fix it once than fix it twice. So what are the chances that our in-house professional engineers can just take a look at it and make their assessment rather than spending a pile of money on engineering for 15K of moving boulders around?
Well, certainly that's where I would start. As you know, Rick Brown is a PE as well as Dan Ron. Dan Ron has a little bit more specialty on the stormwater side. And so I would probably start with those two and just say, what do you think? Is there a better approach than what's shown on these plans that we used for the purposes of the construction? And if they said it looks good, we'd probably then say, do you think there's a benefit to having somebody with just an outside set of eyes look at it just to make sure?
Yeah, okay, that's a great approach. Thank you.
Great, thank Dan, go ahead.
I just make it.
Oh, okay, no comment, okay. Any other comments for the department? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of moving forward with the department's, I guess, edited recommendation of additional bid and some engineering analysis, all please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
And Mr. Chair, with your permission, I do believe there is a sense of urgency to this repair. As you can see, I think we're maybe somewhere around 6 inches away from the edge of the blowout to the surface of the trail. I intend to have this back in April so that we can
Great.
kind of keep momentum on it as best as possible. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is repairs to the culvert on the Hamilton Car Greenway. Mr. Bunich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as many of you will recall, in the summer of 2019, there was a substantial storm that hit during summer, early in the morning, and ultimately this particular area on Route 109 by LaSalle Springs Middle School made the news because there were cars floating down the roadway. A lot of water that water has a force, and ultimately this particular culvert and the railing associated with the culvert was damaged. An assessment was made shortly thereafter, and structurally sound it is, but certainly issues, as you can see. The footings for the posts that hold the railings in place were elevated and bent back. The railings were knocked off. And generally speaking, it's just not an aesthetically appealing look on a major trail corridor along Route 109. The reason that it became an issue at this time was recently at the mayor's coffee at the beginning of this month. The gentleman made a comment that a visitor was in town and noticed it and questioned why everything else looks so good along the trail, but this doesn't. And certainly from the department's perspective, if it was a safety concern or a substantial safety concern, it would not be there. Rest assured that that was investigated and found to be satisfactory. Aesthetically, it's not what we started with and certainly has some issues. But from the perspective of the department, if I could save some money here and do a repair elsewhere that's, let's say, more pressing, that's the approach the department has taken. Obviously, the mayor wanted something to be done, at least in terms of an investigation. And so tonight, with the assistance of T Hill Contracting, they have provided a cost assessment for removing the piers that hold the post and basically reinstalling the piers, new posts, but reusing all the lumber that is in place for the railing system. And they gave an estimate of about $6,500 to complete that. What that work will do is eliminate the trip hazards associated with the elevated piers. As you can see, they're out in the trail and it's not a flat surface, and aesthetically improve that particular location along the corridor. I will tell you that Mr. Hill from T Hill Contracting said that he had given me the worst case scenario in terms of the cost. He actually thinks if they did it on time and materials, it'd be substantially less. So tonight, the department is seeking authorization to proceed forward.
Okay, thank you. You have a
I'll make the same, I'll do the same step. I'm going to make the motion, but then I have.
Okay, and then you're seconding it, Deborah? Okay, sure, of course. Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, as you know, I like to keep our trails as nice as we can, just for that purpose, the visitors and so forth. It gives people a positive impression. I'm not, based on the photos that I saw before your explanation, it didn't look that bad to me. I thought, well, nail a couple of boards back up there and we're done. And then we've saved $6,000 that the department can more usefully deploy elsewhere. But those piers, I can't really tell if it's a big concern. We don't have a lot of rollerbladers and a cyclist would be too far from that wall. So it's just a matter of someone potentially tripping on it. I don't have a problem with, I honestly don't see a problem with putting the two boards back up and waiting until it washes away again, because it's going to wash away again in a couple of years and we're going to be fixing it again. So is the money that we're spending, is that intended to put in deeper posts or something that will withstand the onrushing water next time a little better? Or is it just get back to square one and then wait for the flood to knock it over again?
Get back to square one. According to T Hill, they just can't reset the piers at the level that they were. They basically have to be broken out. And they noticed too that over time, given the wet environment, the concrete starting to spall and the piers themselves aren't as structurally sound as we originally started. It'll withstand somebody running into it, but I'm just saying it's not what we originally built, just because time and water. But from the perspective of the department, it wasn't certainly a project that was on its radar at the start of the year. But as I say, it came up at the coffee with the mayor, and the mayor said that we would investigate it. And for the most part, that's why I'm bringing it to you.
So it looks awfully tall to me, and we could probably do something lower and a little bit longer and anchored at both ends and then not have the potential for, for so much water to back up and put so much pressure on it. Is there, should we, my question is, should we do it right? You've given us a recommendation based on a complaint, one aesthetic complaint, doesn't look awful to me. We can either save some money and add the boards for repair, or we can see if there's a way to do it that's going to be more substantial. Is that a reasonable request of you, or do you actually recommend this $6,000?
Well, there's two parts to my answer. First of all, aesthetically, it's not the railing system that the department would have necessarily endorsed at the time. It just seems out of place along the corridor. There's just something about it that it just doesn't look like it's the rest.
I
of the
agree,
trail.
100%.
So from that perspective, your question, should we just look at it as a fresh start? That might be worth undertaking. But as part of the memorandum I prepared tonight, I also identified a lot of other things that we've talked about as a committee that may be higher priorities to you all, and that's why I gave you the table. We've agreed to re-roof the pavilion because that hasn't had a new roof.
Can you put that table up there? I'm sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead.
Page 2.
I think it's part of the memo.
It is part of the memo. It's page 2 on the memo.
The committee has agreed to re-roof the pavilion. The pavilion was built in 2006. It's now 17 years later, and the roofing shingles need to be replaced. Relative nominal cost. We've talked about the water fountain replacement because it's always been an issue. We have leaks there. When we have to alter the part is hard to get that causes the leak. It's offline for an extended period of time. The light standards, we had to remove one because the aluminum had decayed.
Yeah.
Then we've approved the new ADA enhancements at Community Park, which are necessary. We have a new water fountain that's being discussed at the north end by the two new pavilions. There's been a request to heat the Green Pines restrooms, and we have a cost estimate for that. We received that. And then finally, the project we just talked about, the Rock Hollow Trail repair. So there's a lot of things out there, and several of them I didn't have a cost yet because we haven't gotten to the point where we feel comfortable with what's being offered by either the supplier or the consulting community. It's just like, no, that's not going to work there. I just know. So, like I say, I'm focusing on this particular railing system, but it's part of a larger issue, and that's why the table's included. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you done, Rob? Or
Yeah, I'm looking for, so I'm always inclined to approve such improvements or such maintenance and repairs on our parks. I think we shorted you on the budget this year, it feels like to me. I guess I'm searching for your answer as to whether this is the most appropriate use of scarce funds, or if you'd rather us just, ask you to do it right, kick it down the road a few months, look at it more holistically and price it out. And then maybe it goes on the budget for 2024 to replace the whole thing. And in the meantime, we can go down and screw those two boards back up.
Well, from the department's perspective, as I mentioned, it just never looked right there. And so if we were going to spend $7,000 or $6,500 on it, I'd rather maybe do something that's more in keeping with the character of the trail.
Okay.
And do
so
it better.
Can I change what I've already moved?
So, well, we can do a couple different things. We can vote on that and it can get voted down. And then you can make another motion to kick it down the road.
Okay, sure.
so to
What's
speak.
the easiest? I want to
So-
give Joe the chance
Or
to
you can just amend
do it right.
your motion to whatever you want to change it to.
So I'm going to give this a shot.
Do I have that correct?
There is a standing motion on the floor. So I think if the maker and the second would withdraw the motion and there's no objection, it's off the floor then.
I
Okay,
do,
so we can-
I withdraw it.
So withdraw, but Deborah seconded it, so we would need her approval to do that.
Don't see any problem with withdrawing it. We're replacing it with something.
Yeah, we're pricing it. Yeah.
Okay, so then we have that withdrawn.
Okay.
Okay.
So
If there's
so-
no objection on the other part of the committee members, then it's off the floor.
Okay, and everybody else, okay, and I've got everybody's name down. I got your name, Scott, and I got your name, Teresa, so, and we'll still get to you and stuff like that, so. That being said, we can move. Well, let me let everybody else speak first.
Sure,
and then
sure,
I'll-
absolutely,
okay.
absolutely, sure.
And then I'm gonna come
Yeah.
back to you, Rob, okay? So, okay, we got Deborah, and then I've got Scott and Teresa. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, but I'm a little confused. So what was the purpose of this in the first place? It was to keep cars from running over into the grassy area?
No, the users of the trail. So depending on the circumstances, a bicyclist, a runner, a rollerblader, whatever the situation would be, is that there is an existing culvert pipe that we extended to basically accommodate the trail. So it's about I would say a 36 to 40 inch drop off the backside of that.
Oh,
So it's to protect it there.
is that what that little white stuff is in the back,
Um,
right there?
It's water.
Is that
Yeah,
water?
yeah,
So is
sure
there a
is. Yeah.
creek back there, just a culvert? What is that?
That's the creek itself, and that white stuff through that thistle there or that bush is the water. And so it's really for trail users' protection.
Okay. So my only suggestion is to make it look better is what about staining it?
Well,
Like we have out here and on 100 and 109?
certainly could.
I mean, is that costly?
Oh, no, that's relative to most things we do. Painting and staining wood is probably one of the least cost a component.
That's my 2 cents.
Scott, go ahead, and Teresa, I got you next.
All right, thank you, Chair. Joe, this, what, concerns should we have that erosion may very quickly erode the support for this, I guess for lack of a better term, I'll just call it a wooden fence that's across this bridge. We just took a look at Rock Hollow Trail and what has happened there, and we have concerns there that the erosion could very quickly degrade that, and I might have the same concern over this existing structure that we have here. And then I guess I'll add on to that. To me, this looks like something that's too enticing for a 7, 8, or 9-year-old boy or a girl to climb up the side. And to me, it's a safety hazard. I guess if we're going to do something here, I would like to see this thing totally replaced with something that's sturdier and that may not be as appealing to kids to climb up on.
Very good point. So just to kind of give you, as best I can, a picture, that center pier and post, that's for the most part at the center point of the culvert that goes from the west side of Route 109 underneath the roadway and then out. There are 2 sets of wing walls on either side of that culvert opening. That's what you see, that kind of line there. So from the perspective of the railing system, it's kind of protected by those wing walls, so to speak. The only reason that we had this issue is there's just such a substantial flow during that one storm event. The water just came up against the railings and pushed as hard as it could and elevated those piers. As you can see, they went up in the front and down in the back. So it's not been we've not had the problem before 2019. We haven't had the problem since, but certainly it's a problem that obviously someone noticed and wanted addressed.
Teresa, go ahead.
First, the question I'd have is, are there any requirements on culverts on a trail such as OSHA or ANSI or something that we have requirements to do that? And I guess for now, if not anything different than we have up there now, I like Rob's idea that we just fix it for now. But I would add to that, that instead of in a few months, just to put it on next year's budget and then do it right, get some good ideas in and from the engineering, from our contractors.
Well, based upon what I've heard, what I would probably do is try to identify those elevated portions of the pier. I don't know if it's fluorescent paint or something, just to make sure that it's visible and somebody can see it. I'll check with our Department of Public Works and our park designer to make sure I'm not doing something wrong. But certainly we can fix it and make it as safe as possible while we look at an alternative. So from that perspective, certainly, there are standards, and certainly we'll comply to those standards. Most of the, at least from the building code perspective, which may not be as applicable here as elsewhere, if you have a drop off of a certain height, you have to have a railing a minimum of 42 inches. This is well over 42 inches. So from that perspective, you can certainly look at, if we go in the direction I think we're heading as a committee, we'll look at something maybe that isn't as tall and certainly less, let's say, less bulky as this particular set of railings is, for lack of a better term.
Okay, Teresa, is that it?
I'm done.
Okay, Scott, go ahead.
I guess one question, if we do decide to, I guess, go along the lines that Teresa mentioned with, doing something next year and applying a temporary fix this year, can we put some type of a sign on this fence that says keep off or something of that
Yeah.
sort?
Certainly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So before we get to you, Rob, I'm just going to make a comment myself, and I can appreciate a resident, but I think this flash flood, whatever it was last July, if I remember right.
It was a
19.
Oh, so this is the one from 19?
Yeah.
Okay, so this isn't even the one that just, okay. So we've had one complaint in 4 years, and I can appreciate the mayor responding to the resident. But if I heard it right, it was a non-resident
Mhm.
that made the complaint to a resident who brought it in. So, I mean, I think this probably should get taken care of eventually. But my problem personally is putting it in front of other things, something else has waited. We've all had things in our wards and that we hold near and dear that have waited. And for something just to jump in front of it, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that part. So that's my 2 cents, which will lead me back to Rob, who wants to.
I was going to, can I go ahead and make a motion?
Yep, sure, yep.
So this will be convoluted, Melanie, but.
Well, let me interrupt you for a
Yeah,
second.
sure.
So if we're not moving forward with anything, do we need a motion, or is this just, do we want to make a motion that we add this to look at this from the budget next year, or?
Well, we want to repair it now, right? Just the
Okay,
minimum.
So
repair.
that's where you were going with.
Yeah, I
it
was
now.
going to say,
Okay, my
I was going to
apologies.
suggest
Okay.
along the lines of, see what it takes to restore it to its former glory with a couple of boards. Mitigate the concern for a trip hazard, which is only on the center pier, as I saw it, probably a bag of asphalt and tamp it down and it's fine. And then analyze what it would take to do it, to do a more permanent fix and put it in the budget for 2024.
Okay, fair enough.
Is that good
Yeah,
enough?
yeah, absolutely. Fair enough. And I need a second on that, seconded by Councilmember Flasher. Scott, go ahead.
So I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but in terms of including a keep off sign as
Including
part
us.
of this, can that be?
Are
part
you
of the-
okay with that?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, and Dan, you're okay with adding that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Good.
okay, great idea. Thank you for catching that.
Let's know, people know we're gonna fix it.
Yeah. This is more like our maintenance department taking care of this
Yeah.
instead of contracting.
Oh,
somebody else.
definitely. Yeah.
Deborah, go ahead.
Yeah, just, so this fence seems to have a wing on one side. Was there a wing on the other side ever, or no?
In terms of the culvert, there's a wing wall on each side, and there were boards. 2 boards are missing, one on either side of the center section.
Because So you said the culvert was how wide? 42 feet? Is that what?
No, I was saying that in the, where there's a drop off of a certain height, the minimum railing height is 42 inches typically.
I guess where I'm going is if there was a wing on both sides of this, right now we only see a wing on one side of it. We're talking about repairing it as we see it. So are we, yeah. So was there one over here?
I don't think so. I think this is the center. and
You said like
the two
culvert
railings.
wings, concrete wing walls.
Yes.
that
Oh,
provide-
okay. So we don't really need a wing wall on the fence for safety.
No,
Okay,
no,
that was my question.
no, ma'am.
Okay, anything else? All right, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you very much, everyone. Next item is the special events and trail closure request. Mr. Vunich, looks like you're trying to get in front of something here.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as the memorandum describes, with our trail system, particularly now with the Rock Hollow Valley and Bluffview Park, the city is getting more and more requests for special events by outside organizations. And for the most part, we've tried to accommodate them. As you know, we have our event partnership agreement and et cetera. But more recently, even when we do the event partnership agreement or when the city holds an event, it's very difficult to keep people off the trail. Even though the trail may be posted with closed for a certain event for these hours, it is almost impossible to address the other users that are on the trail system. Knowing that, and just the desire to basically have the trail system open at the prime times when people are available to use them, we did a little investigation and talked with the park superintendent at Castlewood State Park. For the most part, what they do as the state of Missouri is that between April and October, they do not allow organizations to schedule special events within their trail system park area. The point being that between April and October, when people are available and want to use the park because they can't get there during the week, the park is open. They still allow special events during the weekdays. And so for the most part, the department would like to consider mirroring that requirement. Given that our trail system basically intersects and intertwines with Al Foster Memorial Trail. And if you go far enough, Castlewood State Park and the trail system in that facility, I think being consistent in terms of how we handle special events will do a couple of things. Make it easier, obviously, on organizations to know when they can and can't. And certainly when the state imposes their restriction on the weekend, that only puts more pressure on our system. And so from that perspective, we like the committee to consider copying or basically adopting the same approach in terms of our trail system during weekends during the user season. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So you're looking for the committee to basically give you the go-ahead to bring us back like a draft of a proposed policy.
Yes, for the most part, we would have a policy statement for you and ask you to adopt that or approve it and then send it to city council for adoption.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody, Scott?
Just a question.
Sure.
If we were to move forward, have closure from April to October, do you foresee potential for loss of revenue from fees and anything of that from existing events that might only want to be scheduled during that time period?
Well, again, this goes back to another one of our larger issues. We do not charge organizations that have special events for the use. The state does charge a fee for each anticipated runner, bicyclist, et cetera. So they do generate revenue from the events. We do not. So from the standpoint of our current approach, no, we would not be losing revenue.
Thank you.
Okay, Dan?
Do we have any like annual events that we've been doing that are going to be negatively impacted by this?
The Lindenwood University hosts an intercollegiate mountain bike race at the end of October in Bluffview Park and portions of Zombie East and West. That's the one that comes to mind almost immediately. What we're seeing though is just more like smaller organizations. We have one on April 1st, Zombieland, that was canceled in October. It was canceled in March because of the trail conditions. For the most part, we know we're going to have issues because we're concluding our cabin fever hike on the 31st. They want to take our signs down before the 31st, and we're telling them no. So it's just the coordination and the expectation of our organizations that we as the city may not necessarily have the priority, and that's not the case.
I have a follow-up. So would this be something that would go into effect right away? And if so, is there anybody that's already kind of booked our trail system that would then be kicked off based off of this new policy if we were to pass it?
The department will not have the policy back to you till the midpoint of April, which means it would not be to city council till May. So I guess what I would suggest and what we've done in the past, we would just grandfather or honor those commitments. But after the policy is adopted, then no.
Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Scott might be on the right track a little bit. Maybe we should give you the latitude to consider some sort of a fee-based structure. And I would kind of suggest maybe one special event per trail per year, because it's not Castlewood as an entity. This is Wildwood. When we have several different trail complexes, we could refer the general public to one of the other trail systems when we have in the rare instance that we have an event. That seems like a more flexible way to do things, because there could be a few bucks coming in the city, especially if we did it right and maybe charge something. So would you appreciate the direction to go off and analyze that? Or have you already done that and you just figured, well, it's not worth the trouble, we should just keep people out?
Well, the approach the state takes, because they wanted to charge us for the use of Al Foster Trail for our cabin fever hike and our Shivering Shadow 7K. And
People love those, by the way.
yeah, ultimately they decided, you're an entity, you maintain portions of Al Foster under the agreement, we're not going to do it. But what they end up doing is they charge the organizer. How many do you anticipate will be participating? If they say 100, I think it's $5 or something. So it'd be a $500 check we would receive from the organizer. We wouldn't collect from individuals. We'll let the entity do that.
Sure. So does it make any sense? Is that a meaningful sum? Is it worth the trouble to go off and do that? Because I hate canceling, even an occasional event, that mountain bike event. That's a great thing. I'm sure people love it. It shows off our city, and I'm reluctant to just say no more.
Well, certainly, I think as part of the policy, maybe there should be maybe there's a clause where if it's a special event and the department believes it's appropriate, it brings it to committee or something akin to that.
Sure.
That way, at least if it has the merit to be something out of the ordinary or something that would be very beneficial to the community, you all can make that determination.
Yeah, we don't have to make it cumbersome. It just seems like it's a sensible approach. So,
And
Yeah.
what I would suggest is we have 2 of the 3 members of the program budget committee. Maybe that's a discussion we can have on at our final meeting before we conclude and present to city council.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
okay.
Anything else?
Is there
Scott,
any
go ahead.
motion?
So I guess the question and/or comment that I was going to make was tagging on to what Rob just mentioned regarding the mountain bike event. That's a pretty significant event. I would hate to see that one, I guess, end simply because we had a hard and fast rule of going from April to October. So maybe the answer is somewhere along the lines that I think Rob alluded to, which is if we have an existing organization with whom we've been, I guess, making these available for quite some time, they would be grandfathered in so they could continue to have their event. but maybe we just say no to new events that come along.
We'll take a look at it.
Great.
Okay. We do need a motion. Okay, so we got a motion from Dan to move forward with the, I guess, investigation and.
Yes, so the preparation of a policy relative to the use of the trail system during certain months of the year, inclusive of the comments that the department's heard tonight.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
And need a second? Seconded by Councilmember Rambo. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
I,
opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you, everyone. I think that's a good thing to get going there. Next item on the agenda, e-bikes. Mr. Bunich.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, at our February meeting, the department introduced the concept of a policy for e-bikes on the city's trail network. At that meeting, the department provided examples of a e-bike, but one that was very different than what most would probably have a picture of in their mind. It almost more so than anything looked like a electric motocross motorcycle versus an e-bike. The committee had a great discussion and the department tried to summarize some of the points from that discussion and ultimately provide a recommendation. The department does believe a policy is appropriate for e-bikes on the system of trails managed or owned by the city of Wildwood, not so much as to prohibit them. That is not the intent. Certainly, e-bikes have opened up recreation opportunities to a whole group of demographics that, for the most part, may not have been able to enjoy the trail systems in Wildwood for a multitude of reasons. In this particular case, the department is recommending that the committee consider the policy that St. Louis County has fashioned for its trail system, which is obviously substantially greater than ours. But one I want to emphasize was fashioned through a lot of interaction with organizations that use the trail system, whether it be for traditional bicyclists like GORC or e-bikes and the organizations associated with them. So from the department's perspective, the county's policy, I believe, is a good policy, although based upon comments that the committee provided at our last meeting, the department has added some additional items to that policy. The one item that isn't quite resolved yet is that should it be a policy or should it be regulations? The department's leaning toward regulations from an enforcement standpoint. Because again, a policy, you can post the policy's in place, but if someone doesn't follow the policy, all you can do is ask them to leave. You can do nothing else. And so from the perspective of damage to trails, the threat to other users, the department believes a set of regulations may be more appropriate. Mr. Young is still reviewing that discussion, so to speak, that the department introduced to him last week. And I do not have an answer on that yet. And so tonight, instead of asking you to adopt something, the department has a twofold request. First, to give input on the recommended changes that came out of our last discussion a month ago. And then anything else that you might want to add that the department may have missed, that would certainly be appreciated as well. Unfortunately, I think we're going to need another meeting before the policy or ordinance regulations are finalized, just because I think it's imperative to have the city attorney's input.
I would agree. Any questions? Scott, go ahead. Tracy, next.
You need a motion from us that's approved in terms of direction and pursuing either, regulations versus a code ordinance, or what do you need from us tonight?
I would ask the committee to endorse either a policy or set of regulations to manage e-bikes on the city's system of trails. And then a component of that motion to bring back a final direction at the next meeting in April. I'll have the city attorney's input by then.
Then if it's appropriate, I would make the motion to have Mr. Vunich pursue developing some proposed regulations for e-bikes on the city's trails.
That would be appropriate. And then seconded by, I got Deborah seconding it, and thank you, Scott. And Teresa, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question, if we do these regulations and that passes and we put that in, can we add like some sticker that they buy from the city that's like a deer hunter sticker, you know, a tag, so that they have come in, signed a paper, you know, some kind of waiver, I'm okay with, you know, I won't hold the city liable or something.
Certainly there are resident passes for parking and all kinds of different approaches. The one thing I would say is, due to the popularity of our trails, we get people traveling great distances now from outstate areas to come here on the weekends just to use the trails, particularly in Bluffview Park now, with the success Gork has had with trail installation. So I guess the conversation I had, I believe it was Councilmember Rambo, is just making sure we post the ordinance or the policy and at all of the locations where people basically either enter or exit the trail, so to speak, and making sure that they're aware of it, so that there can be no question if they are stopped by our park and trail officer with the county police department and told basically you're in violation, they can't claim they didn't know.
I understand, and I know that not everyone would do it, but some would. And, you know, it's just keep the honest people honest to come in and get a tag for their e-bike.
What I would like to suggest is that since we have an additional month to allow the city attorney to provide final comments, to prepare the final draft, we can certainly look into that and bring back information at the April meeting.
Is that Teresa? Is that it? Yeah, okay, thank you. Deborah, go ahead.
Yeah, so especially when we first initiate this, can we have our park ranger? I mean, is there a certain time or a certain day where there's more likely that we have e-riders doing inappropriate things to our trails, I guess?
It's Saturday and Sunday are the peak utilization days. And so that's when we generally see most of the issues. And generally when we hear from other users on Monday, you wouldn't believe what I saw, or I tried to stop this, that kind of responses. Yes, our county police officer that's assigned to our parks and trails, he generally works the weekends because those are the high utilization periods. So yes, they can enforce regulations, but not necessarily, they can advise about a policy.
Right, and so maybe when we first initiate this, our park ranger can spend a little bit more time than he normally does there to try to help.
Certainly, and I know that Officer Rennick is the park and trail officer with the county police department. He does a great job. He's well known on the trail system by our regular users, so he's really got a good rapport. And so yes, I'm sure once we start into this, we can ask him to basically be our ambassador, so to speak. I will tell you that the Captain Mundell, and Officer Rennick did review the proposed regulation policy, and they found it acceptable, along with our Director of Public Works, Rick Brown.
And then maybe if we can promote it on social media, or even have West County News pick something up.
Yeah,
West
definitely.
Magazine.
Good suggestion. Yeah, getting it out that, you know, we want your e-bikes here, but here's the parameters associated with that use.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, personally, I'm big on human power and not so much on electric power on our trails. And so I would ask, if it's not too cumbersome, to consider starting this policy at Bluffview and then give it a trial period to see how it goes before we expand it to all of the trails, the mixed use trails that allow cycles, just because, you know, once you let the cat out of the bag, it's hard to get it back in.
Mhm.
Is that reasonable?
Well, that's where probably the lion's share of complaints have started and come from.
Yeah, I just think these powered vehicles, it's just, we already allow folks with different problems, mobility problems, they can use their vehicles. This is just purely recreational. And I personally, as a cyclist of longstanding, think it's kind of lazy, just get a bike, ride it. So
What I will do is when I have the conversation with the city attorney, I'll ask him if we can kind of implement it at different locations, and first and foremost, the area where we have the greatest extent of e-bike utilization and the problems we're seeing, and then expand it if we need to or not. And I'll also check with the captain of the police department just to make sure that from an enforcement standpoint, he's comfortable as well.
awesome. Great. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Scott, go ahead.
So just to tag on to what Rob was mentioning, I'm with Rob in terms of I'd rather see people, this is just a general comment, I'd rather see people using pedal power than e-power. But I guess also I ride the trails on my bike and walk them quite a bit. And I see people walking along with dogs on 10-foot leashes that are stretched across the trail from time to time. And I just see a lot of potential for safety issues if we do allow e-bikes on the trail. So I think the suggestion to possibly try this at Bluffview Park is a good one. The other thing I was going to mention, I know you're going to take these regulations that you come up with and probably have John Young review them. I think it's very important. I understand where Teresa is coming from regarding requiring people to buy a sticker and possibly sign a waiver. But I'm also concerned that we may be getting into a legal issue here if we're requiring that from residents, but not requiring it from people that are coming from out of town. Plus the image that it almost makes it look like we're treating out of town visitors in a much better manner than we're treating our own residents, because the out of town visitors will not be required to get these stickers.
And I will consult the city attorney on this tag or sticker program. We'll also call maybe a couple of other communities.
Yeah.
There's really no one quite like Wildwood other than St. Louis County. So I'll start there and see if they've ever considered that. And if they did, was it implemented? And if not, why wasn't it? So I'll try to do some background for you.
Thank you. Deborah, go.
Yeah, can you get John's input on starting it at one location and not all at the same time?
Yes, ma'am. Definitely. Thank you.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor, correct? We do. Yes, you made the motion, right, Scott? Yes. Okay, so I don't see any other questions or comments. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you. And just as a post comment, we would probably also want to add this to any information, like especially if there are regulations on our website and app, because I'm sure that's where the out of town people are finding like how to get to a trail. Yep. Next item on our agenda is charges for food and drink at city events. Ms. Ripito.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Going with our theme for the evening, revenue, expenditures, and budget. I feel like this falls right in line. As you're aware, the city does host a wide variety of events and programs that are family friendly and appeal to everyone from artists to athletes and are at a minimum cost to the participants. The events are loved by the residents and even surrounding areas, and some of them even bring people in from out of state and are part of what makes Wildwood such a great place to live, work, and play. That being said, there are costs associated, and the city events can range anywhere between $4,000 to $100,000 per event. And so the department was tasked with increasing overall revenue to offset the city's costs for our events due to budget reductions in 2023, and as well to decrease taxpayers' money going towards said events. So the department explored several options in an attempt to find a way of doing this in the least impactful way. and took into account raising associated fees, charging for events that don't have fees, charging for services or products that historically the city has provided, or decreasing the number of events. And decreasing the number of events got cut real quick because nobody wants less events. In fact, most people want more events. So given that we'd like to generate more revenue, but we don't really want to decrease participation or make this not possible for families to be able to do, charging for events that we don't charge for or increasing fees that we already have seemed like it could be impactful and have a negative impact by decreasing participation. So the department thought the least impactful solution would be to charge for some of the extras that we give at existing events, and suggested considering charging a discounted rate for concessions at our summer concert series. So the city would essentially theoretically sell tickets that were $1 each and could be utilized to purchase a hot dog, Kona ice, kettle corn, things that typically have been free of charge, and the city has covered the entire cost. Based on the expenses incurred in 2022, this minor adjustment would generate between $2,500 to $2,800 per concert, and in revenue, which could be up to $10,000, $11,000 annually just by charging $1 per ticket. And then residents would still be getting a free event. It wouldn't limit participation. The same people can come, and if they want to bring their own sodas, they won't be penalized for bringing their own sodas or their own food. And so essentially, it would still be open to the same number of people, and the tickets aren't mandatory. As to beverages, the department would suggest not charging for those yet. Baby steps. We'll probably get some pushback as far as charging for the hot dogs and Kona ice and such. And also when it comes to water, we want to keep people hydrated. And so, but we were discussing it and maybe limiting the number of sodas that are given away because, as it is, we just go get more when we run out. And so we were thinking maybe if we just had a cap on it, kind of like the hot dogs, when we run out, and that's it. So that we're still providing it, but we just aren't refilling it. So although there might be some pushback initially, this minor adjustment would enable the city to provide the same number of events, the same level of services, and residents still receive the event free essentially. And so tonight, the department is seeking the committee's input on this recommendation regarding this program. And with that, that concludes our presentation. But Mr. Vunich and I are here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Scott, go ahead.
Melanie, what percentage of a typical event would the dollar tickets cover, do you think?
Percentage of the event, I couldn't say. I can say that we do get, the Kona ice and the kettle corn and such at a discounted rate. So it would still be discounted. Mr. Vunich, do you have more insight on this than I?
Generally speaking, and we can certainly provide you the invoices associated with this, a hot dog with bun and chips cost the city about $2. And we do 800 of them. Kona ice and the kettle corn on a very busy concert night is about $1,000. So when you calculate that all out, we're somewhere around $3,500 to $4,000. If we collected $1 per hot dog with chips, $1 for shaved ice, and $1 for kettle corn, we're anticipating that using the same number of about 800, we would end up with about $2,500 to $2,800. So we're still not breaking even. But certainly we're decreasing the extent of exposure the city has with taxpayers' funds.
Do we know what other nearby municipalities are doing in terms of similar events and what they're charging for concessions, that sort of thing?
That we would be happy to look into. From my experience alone, I can tell you that Manchester doesn't provide sodas or food. They have vendors that come in and they don't discount anything. Wildwood is pretty special when it comes to our events, but yeah.
Well, I know
we'd be
if it's
happy to
an
look into
initial
that.
shock with going from free to a cost, even if it was only 25
true.
cents a piece.
It is very true.
Mr. Ottenberg, I think that was part of the reason we started at $1. So most people, we would sell the tickets at a city table, and then they would just give the tickets to the shaved ice vendor, et cetera. And then the difference we would pay, the vendor then would basically subtract the number of tickets to the total cost, and we would pay the difference. It's not to say that in a next year that the price would go up for the tickets that we sell. But yeah, we're going to kind of go from, we're going from nothing to something. And what we found when we increased the fee for the early childhood recreation programming, we have the number of children that participated. And that was just $5 per child.
Mm.
So it didn't take much to basically dilute the interest for a while. Now it's
Okay.
rebounding, but for several years, it was like, what happened? Is it really just $5?
Teresa?
Yeah, I had a few suggestions.
Hmm?
One is, instead of the tickets, that you just have one place that instead of giving out tickets, they have a hand stamp. So you just stamp the hand and it shows that they paid a set amount, like $5 for a hand stamp, and then you can get anything you want for free, you could say, but really they've paid their $5, but it would cover any of the food that they wanted to get that is usually free. One thing that at Albert Pujols All-Star basketball games, he always has one little section of seating that it's just bleachers, but it's one little section that you have to pay to be able to sit there. So you reserve this seating, and then he's got like your name set on the bleacher. And that's one way that they raise money for the Pujols Foundation. But you have to pay for that.
Mhm.
Another, I don't know if we can do it or not, but if we had raffle items so that
Actually, we were going to try that at our first concert in May.
that'd be great, because we've got a lot of company or businesses here that might donate something, a basket or something that gives them a lot of advertisement at the same time.
Mhm.
And we have T-shirts sometimes in Wildwood, and people would like to have a Wildwood T-shirt, the ones that live here, or maybe even ones that come in, give to grandma and grandpa and stuff. And the last thing that I have is at Belle Reve Elementary School, they have a wall of these, I think they're like 4x4 tile. And they get them, they're unglazed, and they have a seating area, or they used to, I haven't been there for a long time, but where people at events, they would come in and you could sit there and paint on your tile.
Mhm.
And those tiles were taken to a local school and they would bake them in the kiln. And then they have on the side of their building, on the side of their school, this whole wall of tiles. And so kids, grandparents, parents, they love to come and look at these tile. And we have, sides of our city hall. We have walls in the entrance of the city hall, different things that we could do that. And that makes a lot of money because they sell them for like $15 for the tile when it costs, a couple of dollars for
Mhm.
it with the paint. Those are just some ideas.
Those are excellent suggestions. Thank you.
Teresa. Any other, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, I think everybody, regardless of station, should be able to come and participate equally in these kinds of events, and giving them water is a great thing. I wish we had water fountains around the area. Hopefully we'll have a bunch of them in in the Village Green when we start opening that up. But I would say the pain of paying $1, people are going to complain the first couple times, but after that, it will no longer be any factor whatsoever. And if it drives people to bring their own snacks and so forth, it's still saving the city money because, because they're not consuming the subsidized kettle corn or just whatever. So I think it makes sense to do that ticket or coupon thing. I think it's a great approach, and it's a creative solution to a problem that we have. So appreciate the effort.
Absolutely.
Deborah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've even had several families be surprised by the fact that they come to a Wildwood event and they get free snacks. So I don't know that there's going to be that great a pushback on, everybody's having to tighten their belt. Free is better always, of course, but I really don't think a lot of our residents are going to, be upset by having to purchase a $1 ticket.
I was shocked that they were free, and those are impressive hot dogs.
Yeah, I would agree. I think also we're going to get a notice, and if you've worked those booths, which I've never done, but I've stood there and watched, I mean, you do have like grown people, adults going up there grabbing 8 hot dogs and then taking them back to their kids in their wagon and probably throwing 3 or 4 of those away when they get home or before they even leave. So I think they're not going to grab 8 of them unless if they have 3 kids, So Scott, go ahead.
I wonder if we could experiment with one of the events and have food trucks supply the food versus the city of Wildwood supplying the food. Have the food trucks make it known to the potential vendors that we're going to have an event on a particular day. Then ask them to pay maybe a $100 deposit just to assure that they're going to participate, which could be refundable after the event. And then have 4 or 5 food trucks that are there with different types of food. That way, that would basically offload from the city the responsibility for providing the concessions. And it could be, I guess, maybe promoted as an added attraction to the event.
No, go ahead. I'm
If
sorry.
I may.
Oh, yeah, please.
So we can definitely look into that. I would say that the only issue that comes to mind immediately is that most food trucks have a minimum sales that they have to get when they come to the city. And if they don't meet that minimum in sales, then we're responsible for covering it anyway.
Oh, I
And
see.
so when you have 4 or 5, that can get more and more expensive.
Sure. Well, maybe it's 1 or 2, or maybe it's just maybe I just made an impractical suggestion. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Teresa, go ahead. And we do need let me put you on pause there for a second, Teresa. So are you looking for a motion from the committee just to explore the other options, or what exactly are you looking for, Melanie?
Yeah, if you want to handle that.
Well, our first concert is about 7 or 8 weeks away. So I think we'd like to get some direction tonight if possible, even if it's just to try the program with hand stamping or ticketing, see what we come up with. But we're getting to that point where we need to start making some decisions and be prepared for the May 19th event.
Okay, Teresa, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, one comment and then I will make a motion, but the water, I don't see that we need to give them bottles of water. If you have those huge water jugs like they have at the baseball field and they just have cups and go get their own water. And if they want more bottled water, they could buy that for their $1. But I will move that we move forward with the best option that the department sees, whether it's when they find out about the tickets or stamps, whichever would be cheaper, to go ahead with that and as presented.
Seconded by Council Member Flasher. Any other comments? Go ahead, Deborah.
Yeah, so if we do, are you doing tickets so that you can track how much money you should trade off with the other vendors that provide the food? How would you do that if you use stamps?
That is valid. So yes, the tickets are intended for accountability, like that the vendors then turn in the tickets to us and they have to have the tickets in order to show that they've sold this many in order to get paid for that many. And so that does increase accountability. Also, I think that if you're just selling dollar tickets versus a $5 stamp, more people would be apt to, somebody like myself might just want a hot dog. I'm getting a free soda from the city. What else do I need? But, they might not want to spend $5 for a hot dog or a Kona ice or something like that. So, but yeah, the purpose is essentially accountability.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, sorry, Joe,
Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick, I mean,
we don't hear you yet.
can you hear me now? Check, check.
Oh, hold on. We might have technical difficulties here.
That's okay.
Right. There you go. We hear you now.
I mean, I guess I understand some of the logic about $1 tickets. I think if we're gonna charge for things, we should probably charge because those prices are going to keep going up. I also think we should look into some sponsorships from some of our local businesses because it's really not a lot of money for a business to be able to, say, hey, I sponsored this whole event. Here's a little thing we put up front or whatever. And you're creating an additional kind of logistical situation with people that are used to just handing these things out. Now they have to collect tickets. People have to get tickets. It's a lot to think through where I think we could kind of sour some people on these events pretty quickly if we don't know what we're doing right out of the gate. So
If I may, Mr. Chair. And again, Mr. Lee, our economic development manager, probably has a much better pulse of the business community, but I've heard from several of them over time as we've tried to get sponsorships for Celebrate Wildwood event, is that pretty much every day somebody's asking for something from them. And it's not that they've not been generous with the city, but certainly we can consider that, but it's difficult sometimes for city employees to go to a business and ask for something when the next day I may be there telling them to take down a temporary banner. And so from that perspective, it's just a difficult process to ask for certain things at certain times. We've looked into it before. We think we're fairly successful at Celebrate Wildwood with the street banners and some of the things we do there to promote the businesses. And certainly they've been very generous with the Route 66 scavenger hunt in terms of gifts. I just don't know how many times, Mr. Farmer, we can go to the well.
Joe, you still have your hand up. Do you have?
Oh, yeah, no, I just think I would encourage you guys, and maybe this is something that Mr. Lee can look at, but I really think that you could create a logistical nightmare right out of the gate and people are going to be unenthused quickly. If this goes, I mean, $1 is not a lot of money for sure. It's not that at all. It's also not a lot of money to bring in. So if we're not even offsetting these things to be break even, I don't know. I'm not one of those persons that's like, well, something's better than nothing. I just think we should either do it or not.
Mr. Goodrich, did you have another comment?
Well, certainly we recognize we're not offsetting all of the costs, but I guess I should say the department director, I thought that maybe we walk before we run and just see how logistically it works, what the numbers are after the first concert. And if we need to increase it, then certainly we can. So it was just an attempt to kind of walk into it with both eyes open, so to speak, versus just trying to basically recoup everything in our first try.
Okay, Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to respond to something you said about asking the businesses to help out. And I appreciate that because I, working with Special Olympics, have asked everybody for something, from Sony Films to, Kinko's. And, but the caveat is that you ask them, you're helping them out too. You're giving them something for it. Is there some way we can do that and have banners up that that advertise their business at the events when they do donate something, so that it balances it out. They've got the advertisement and exchange.
Certainly, and that's what we do at Celebrate Wildwood. We offer the, certain sponsorships. You have the stage. The stage is the Big Chief Roadhouse stage. We do those things, and certainly we can do them for the concerts and other events. And I just struggle sometimes when we have a $30 million budget as a city each year, and we're going out to the businesses asking for money.
So
And that's just me. I work for you. You tell me to go out to the businesses, I'll go out to the businesses.
well, and hold on a second, Melanie. We're getting a little bit off topic here. We have a motion on the floor to charge $1, basically. So are we on the motion, Scott?
Yeah, just real quick,
Okay.
one sentence. I think probably the easy solution here is to ask Mr. Lee to be the one who goes out and approaches some of the local businesses. That way you don't have to do it.
Okay.
And it's not that I haven't. And it's just, like I say, it's awkward at times because
No, I get where you're coming from, because you have to go out and talk to them about signs and banners and that sort of thing. You don't want to have to go back in necessarily the next day, whereas Mr. Lee could do it.
Yep. Okay. Melanie, go ahead. Did you have another
Just
comment?
put it out there. Mr. Lee did go around to all the businesses regarding the Hometown Heroes program and sponsorship there. And we have one business sponsorship banner for that program.
Okay,
Okay.
So I don't know that it's there. So.
Gotcha.
all right. Good
Okay.
information.
So we've had a lot of good comments and everything. We do have a motion on the floor. The department will come back at our next meeting with that if we approve it. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're getting a little bit past our scheduled time here. The next two items on the agenda are typically FYI items as well, the in-person and virtual reception and the facility reservations. Any questions or comments for the department from anyone? All right, seeing none, we do not have an executive session scheduled, so any final comments? Dan,
Motion to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn. Do I get a second? Seconded by Councilmember McCutcheon. Non-debatable. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you. Thank you for the department for your time and as always, and all your good work and your patience with us. And let's go see if the USA's winning their baseball game.